Hello and welcome to the 4th Southeast Gravel Race in Walhalla, South Carolina. This was a really cool race and I'm really glad that I made it down to do it. This video is going to be a little bit different in that I didn't get a lot of footage of too many moments in the race, really just the one climb and then a little bit after that. So that's really what I'm going to dive into, and that's going to be a bulk of this video in terms of race footage. But first, this is the start, and so this is the ride data from this event. And looking at this data, you can see that the race was just under 70 miles. Took me about 3 hours and 46 minutes, and that was the bulk of the riding. And you can see that I had a normalized power of 268 watts and an average of 221. My max power there is definitely false. That definitely is a stages error. I wish I could put out that much power, but I can't. And so that's kind of really how this race went, was the data that you're seeing on the screen right here. And I do break this race down into kind of 3 pivotal moments over the course of the event, and so we'll go through those, starting with this one right here. This is the Winding Stair climb, which is the part of the race I was most excited about. It is roughly 4 miles and it took a little over 20 minutes to complete. And I was really excited for a climb because I love long climbs. I'm not really a climber necessarily, but I just really enjoy climbing. And I knew that this was really going to be the moment that broke up this race and the winners would kind of rise to the top. And so on screen now, you can see my data from the climb, and you'll see that I averaged 319 watts with a normalized of 326. I paced myself, I think, really well here on this climb. I knew that I didn't want to blow up and that I wanted to just ride at my own pace. In the past, I found that I tend to try and stick with the leaders, but this time I was more realistic. I know that I'm not as strong as the guys like Dylan Johnson and folks like that, but I knew that I think that I can climb pretty well. So I figured if I just ride at my own pace over the course of this climb, hopefully I'll end up in a group kind of fighting it out for a place on the podium. And that is essentially what happened. So you can see we make a left across this bridge right here, and this is kind of really where the action kicked off. The power kind of immediately went up and people really started to try and break it up. And at this point, I've kind of moved myself towards the front of the race here on this climb. Unfortunately, this guy, I think his name was Barry, on the right there, you can see him swing out and he just rode away. And by all accounts, from talking to people after the race, his speed on the climb was pretty ridiculous. And I'm really glad I didn't stick with it. Here, I was monitoring my power, I was looking at my heart rate. I knew if I went any deeper, chances are I wouldn't be able to recover well. So I tried to settle in and I let that group go. I'm really glad that that's the decision I made, because here I am eventually on my own, and by this point I have caught and passed a lot of those people that you saw riding away from me, and I've slowly been picking off people while I was going up this climb, which was a really good feeling. There's a group right there just in front of me that you can see that I'm riding towards. And then here I've kind of made it into this little elite group. I was really happy to see this. This is Eric Thompson just in front of me. He races cyclocross. He's a really strong rider. And so when I caught him, I kind of knew I was towards the head of the race, and I settled in even more just to stick with him and kind of ride on his wheel. And then ultimately we rode together really well. And this is us reaching the top of the climb. Just in front of us there is Tyler Miranda, again, a really strong rider. And so I was really excited when we saw him, because I was like, oh, well, you know, this is kind of it. This is the head of the race. And so this was really the first big moment of this event, was right here. This was Winding Stair climb. So I'm throwing this clip in here to kind of set the scene for what was going on. So just in front of us right there, you can actually see Eric Thompson kind of riding away from us. This is kind of how it went. It was us yo-yoing off the back of him. At this point, we're still in this little group of 4, and we're on the next section of gravel. And it was pretty sawtoothy, really jagged, kind of punchy. And Eric was crushing it on the descents, and he kept opening up gaps, and eventually we couldn't hold on to his wheel anymore, and he ended up getting away from us. And that is what happened on this stretch of road. Thankfully, we caught a guy from the lead group, so they kind of traded places. Eric ended up in the lead group, one guy got dropped, and so we were still in a group of 4. And that's kind of how we rolled around the course for quite a while. We knew that there were 3 people up the road, so we were racing for 4th, and that's kind of how a lot of the race went. And then this kind of leads into this next pivotal moment, which I'm going to throw up on screen now. So by this point in the race, we were still in a group, but at this point it was just 3 because we'd actually stopped at a rest stop and a big group had caught us. And I thankfully had just finished filling up my bottle, and so as soon as that group was rolling into the rest stop, I took off, and a couple people came with me. And here on this climb here, I ended up dropping those 2 folks. And I didn't know anything about this climb. I didn't know how long it was. I didn't even know it was coming. And so it was a little unexpected, but I hit this climb and I just rode at a good effort, dropped the people I was with, and ended up going solo for quite a while. I think that eventually I got caught with about 15 miles to go, but this is the effort that it took to go solo. Just under 300 watts. It was only a 7-minute climb, a little under a mile. And so that's this effort right here. So once I was solo, I kind of really wanted to keep it that way. I started to kind of think about, how cool it would be to roll in on my own in 4th place. I was pretty committed to not getting caught, so I tried to ride at a good pace, and for a long time I kind of was just out there on my own. But eventually I did notice that I was starting to see a group pretty far back behind me, and so I got into the mindset of, okay, well, the catch is probably going to happen. I need to sit up, start resting, and wait to get caught and brought back. And I'm really glad I did, because inevitably when the catch happened, it was a big group. Tinker was there along with Bobby Julick, Thomas Turner, and another former pro named Barry. And so they caught me, and thankfully I had sat up early enough and rested enough that I still had some gas left in the tank, and I was able to kind of stick with them. And then that's kind of how the race went. I think they caught me with about 15 miles to go, and I knew that I just had to stick with them. It was super painful. Very often I thought that I was going to crack. I figured that I was going to blow up, and I knew that it was just a game of survival, which leads to the final big moment of the race, which is going to be right here. I'll throw that data on the screen, and there's the final attack that I put in. I had the route on my Wahoo, and so I saw the finish line coming up, and then also the finish was at a school. I saw the school zone sign, and I knew that if I was gonna do it, it had to be now. And so I put in a pretty big attack, and that's the data you see here. I averaged 347 watts for just a minute and 19, which is not that high, but you can see my max, and I actually think that's probably pretty close to being accurate. I just attacked really hard and held that power for not long, not the max, but I held a high power for a little bit, got a pretty big gap. I ended up finishing 7 seconds in front of them. So I finished 4th. Tinker came in 5th, and then I'm not really sure the shakeout past that, but that's how the race went. I was really thrilled because it was really exciting to kind of look around like 10 miles from the finish line and see who I was in a group with. It was kind of mind-blowing. I was actually just kind of kept having that imposter syndrome kind of thing, like I certainly shouldn't be in that group, and I couldn't believe that I was there. But yeah, it was a really good race, and I'm really, honestly proud of myself for how I ended up racing it. It felt like it was a really good event for me. I'd kind of been starting to not believe my power meter leading into this. Tempo and steady state were starting to feel kind of easy. And I felt like my Falling Creek podium was a bit of luck. And so it's kind of nice to come out here to this event and really just kind of put it all out there and get a good result and kind of back up all the training I've been doing.